So, our first person to speak to this report, if you're not familiar with the report, it is available online from the Otago site. I'll try to put the link into the chat as we go along. Our first speaker to address it is Ian Hudson from the Salvation Army. Ian is Director of Social Policy and Parliamentary Unit at the Salvation Army. Many of you will be familiar with the State of the Nation report, which comes out in February and is an area of work that Ian is very involved with. And we're absolutely delighted that he's able to start us off this evening with a few remarks. Just before I pass over to him, it looks like almost everybody is on mute already, which is absolutely great. Many thanks to you for that. If you're not on mute already, please put yourself on mute unless you're just about to speak. On that note, over to you, Ian.
Kia ora koutou, ko Ian Hudson aho. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. And as you heard, I work as Director of the Social Policy and Parliamentary Unit. And this report was really something that we were excited to receive because food security is something that we've really been concerned about. We see as a really key issue in New Zealand society. And of course, the Salvation Army provides in over 70 centres nationally, 88,000 food parcels to over 33,000 whānau. And so we've got an intense interest in this subject and particularly wanting to see whānau flourish, enhancing people's mana and agency with the people that we interact. And of course, this exploring new ways, this document really helps to do that in a really good way. And of course, being in part of the Social Policy and Parliamentary Unit, we have a focus on trying to figure out what are the systemic issues behind all of this. And this report delves into that in a good and helpful way. So we think that the report's really important. It gives really clear voice to the people who access a range of food provision around the different services. It gives really clear voice. You get good feedback of what's actually how it feels, both good and not so good. But we sometimes only want the good news, but really, to be real, you do need to hear the other stuff. And I think we appreciate that. Many people doing a lot of good work, and that report does catch that. And a lot of people helped by the way we are doing things, but some real questions also asked that I thought were good. I like the analysis from philosophical dimensions of the issue, human rights, looking at some of the politics and exploring the systemic aspects of it. And of course, coming from a Christian background, for us in the Salvation Army, having at least some attempts to grapple with the missional, if you like, theological aspects of it was very much appreciated. I think it provides a really strong support to the kōrero that's going on at the moment around some of the food provision services, as evidenced by such groups as Kore Hiakai. And also, we ourselves found this really came at a good time because we've just been working on a new food security framework within the Salvation Army that we've just launched. And this report, the framework's called Te Kai Makona, and it really helps support what we're saying, a whole new way of operating, much more relational, less transactional. All of the things that this report say really give us confidence that some of the things that we're trying to move away from, some of the things that we did. This report really helped organisations like ourselves understand where we fit within the system and how maybe we intentionally or unintentionally end up being part of a system that isn't helping and is maybe capturing people into a cycle of poverty that no one has the intention of creating. So we really appreciate this report. It's robust basis that helps us in that respect. And as far as who should get this report, I really think that a lot of organisations, not just those who are involved with food security, because a lot of how it addresses is really what happens in all kinds of social services, about how we interact with people, how we work alongside instead of doing to them, but being alongside people. And I think MSD, work and income, agencies like that, politicians, ministers, or spokespeople for social services really need to see these, and just so many different, really anyone who has an interest in addressing the unacceptable level of poverty and inequality in this country. This report, I think, is something that people should read. So, yeah, kia ora koutou.
Kia ora, Ian. Thanks very much for that. And I think that's your last point there, but this is something people should read, is something I would strongly echo and underline. In a piece that Jonathan Robinson wrote that was featured on the Baptist Church New Zealand website, he described some of the origins of this report in conversations with Kitty around the PhD work that she'd done here at the University of Otago. It was 2016 to 2021 that she did that very intensive work over a 5-year process. And speaking to Jonathan at a public theology event at Musselburgh Baptist Church, the question came up how to make this important research more available and more accessible to the churches, and two quite significant challenges there. But the report is intended to do both of those. It makes it more available in terms of it's a short version of a long PhD report. If you're interested in the wider research, that's also available here at the University of Otago. But this is the short version that picks up particularly around some issues that we'll be exploring tonight, and then to make it accessible, available through an open access form available through the university. So just picking up and echoing, and I suspect our next speaker will say something along similar lines, that the value of making this report available to those in the churches is something that is very much intended in making it available in this way. So with that in mind, and hoping I haven't snagged some of what you were going to say, Rachel, let me hand over to our second endorser, Rachel Murray from the Otago Southland Baptist Association, speaking on behalf of the New Zealand Baptist Union. Over to you, Rachel.
Well, kia ora koutou, everyone. I feel like I should just say hi and sit back and carry on. But it's a pleasure to be part of this. And so just a little bit more about me. I'm one of our Baptist Churches of New Zealand regional leaders based in Dunedin, currently though sitting in Wanaka. So there are worse places to be as I look at the mountains. But I want to start by thanking Kitty and Jonathan in particular for the significant work that you have done. Kitty, I think you've done a phenomenal job in putting this together, and hugely appreciative of this. The Baptist Union was invited to support this study and certainly agreed to do so. And I think given the initial forums that happened at Jonathan's leading, and I suspect a few others at Musselburgh Baptist, this is hugely significant. I think that desire for the church to engage with and understand more deeply some of the critical issues that have been so topical is to be significantly applauded and very clearly impactful for not only the church, but the community as a whole, I think. I mean, I also want to concur with Ian, but a few more comments more specifically from me. There are a large number of churches, Baptist and otherwise, that have been involved with some established forms of support for food, around food security, I think, for quite some time. As Baptists, we certainly don't have any monopoly, we know that. But the other thing that I think is increasingly noticeable, and particularly off the challenges of recent years, is that the need for basics of life is only increasing. I think we see some people have needed assistance for many, many years. But even just this last week, I've heard of people who have never, prior to this last week, ever needed to ask for help before, and it's becoming a regular story. I've also just this past week been talking with a church who's very keen to develop some sort of support for families over this coming Christmas season, where there's a recognition that often food security or food insecurity can be more keenly felt. So it's out there. But I think the other thing that this report has reiterated again for me, and I think for many of our churches it will, is that we might see the need, but we don't necessarily understand the story behind the need. So instead of listening, we assume, and that assumption can have some pretty significant damaging effect. I think we all know assumption is a killer of understanding. It's a killer of value and of dignity. And be it us as churches or any organisation, we need to ensure that we're not in that habit that needs to be broken. I think the other thing is it's too easy to justify our support, and that certainly comes out through the report. When churches or the likes of churches rely so heavily on donations, there can be an expectation from donees to tell us how you are using these funds, justify the use of these funds. And the question that came to mind for me is, what comes first? The addressing of human need and dignity and human rights, or justifying structure and money? So I think for any group, whether it is faith-based or otherwise, that is currently involved or at the very early stages of considering some sort of activity or ministry in this whole area of food security, this report is, for me, it's a mandatory read. It is profound, it is challenging reading, it is yet it's highly accessible in its approach and of deep value. I think it raises matters that demand both external and internal reflection. And it's too easy for any group to just keep doing what they've been doing for a long time without any self-review. So this is a good prompter to do that. And I think especially as churches and as followers of Jesus, those of us who are in that area, we often talk about following the command of Christ to feed the hungry, to care for others, and to equally love our neighbours as ourselves. But in the outworking of that, we can run a risk of sidelining the very people that we seek to care for. So the report, I believe, is a reminder to revisit our motivations, be it as churches, as faith-based organisations of any context, to revisit our understanding of Scripture, about the ministry that we do have good intentions that we seek to do. It's a reminder to ask questions of those that we seek to serve, the whys, the whats, the hows, the whens, etc., to put our ears on and our brains engaged and involve people in the decision-making processes, because everyone gains when all the voices are at the table. It's a reminder to steward wisely the resource that we are working with, be that people, money or time, to treat people with dignity. It's helpful to clarify rationale and approach to our activity, helpful for re-evaluation of current practice. And the recommendations and the discussion questions at the end are a wonderfully solid base to actually do that work. And it helps us all, churches, organisations, to listen to see and to value people just as Christ did, not just its presenting need. And just to finish, all day today, I've spent online hooked into the Global Leadership Summit conference, and two of the very last phrases of the day were these, and I thought they were quite a particularly applicable segue into this evening. The first one was, get in the trenches and listen to real need. And the second one was, if you empathise and listen properly, people become visible and valuable. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank you, Rachel. So we've heard so far from two people involved in key organisations with some initial reflections and thoughts on the reports. At this point, we're going to hear from the author herself, Kitty, who may make a few introductory remarks, but the main focus of the next part of this evening is for her to talk with two of the people she spoke to in doing the research and taking part in the report. So I'll pass over to Kitty. I'll ask you to introduce the two people when you're ready to. If you'd like to make a few remarks first, feel welcome to do that. And then we look forward to the conversation between the three of you. Thanks very much, Kitty.
As you know, I was going to go straight into the discussion with Steve and Hawaii. Those guys are both there. I didn't know if you wanted to. So Steve and Hawaii were both participants in the research that I did, and I'm so happy that they're here today to talk about their experiences. So I don't know, Steve, if you want to introduce yourself first and just say why you wanted to take part in the research to begin with.
Hi, I'm Stephen Selnix, here to come and talk about food banks and all stuff that's happening around and see if we can help some people out.
Hawaii?
Kia ora tātou katoa on hono he tū poto tēnei, a koe mea tū po ai hau, ko mota tau te maunga hiki rangi te awa, so henare te marae, ngā puhira o ko ngā tihini ngā iwi, tōra wai te hapu, toko roa ku tamariki, and ko Pauai, hotorine tōku inga. So hi everybody, my name's Pauai, I am from Northland and I took part in this study. Oh, I don't know, I was just interested. See what people got to say. I have been a current user a couple of times, but it's just more, I don't know. I just want to hear what people want to say, but more looking at solutions moving forward. So yeah, that's it. That's me.
And Steve, I know that you said a lot in the interviews about how food banks had helped you and you've had really positive experiences. So if you could talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, if we didn't have food banks, we would be pretty much screwed because the price of living and people's wages doesn't cut the costs of trying to survive and feeding people and kids and stuff like that. If we didn't have food banks, there'd be a lot of starving people out there, and it's really hard for people to survive, especially when you do get unexpected bills that come in during the week. Like for me, I need new tyres for my truck, so 1 week I've got to pay for my tyres and still get some food. The next week I've got to pay for them to get put on, and if I can't afford food, I ask the food bank we can have some help along with that, which is a big help, I feel.
And then, yeah, when you've gone to food banks, how have you found it? Have you found it like helpful? Have you found it like a positive?
Yeah, it is. When you're having somebody there to talk to and asking why are you here and what can we help you with, just unexpected bills. Everybody has unexpected bills. You know, shit happens, and that's life. But it doesn't. It's not hard to ask. It's like my old man said. It's never hurts to ask. It's got to be yay or nay. So you never know until you ask. And they do ask if is there
Hey,
things that you need for.
Tipu. Sorry. I'm just feeding my.
That's so good.
Just lost the thought then. Yeah, I reckon there's a lot of lovely people out there that do work for the churches and that, and they volunteer, and that is lovely to have people that got big hearts to want to help other people out. And when I get stuck on the food bank, yeah, there's some stuff I like, and yes, there's some stuff I wouldn't eat. For me, the stuff that I don't have is I'll bring up some friends, and if they eat it, sweet as, I'll go up to them, or otherwise I'll go to the supermarket and put it back into the bins for the food bank. So it's just going around in circles, just trying to help any way we can, I suppose.
Yeah, no, that's great. And Powai, I remember you've had kind of slightly different experience with food banks. I don't know if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I step back and look at the bigger picture and think, why do we even have food banks to start with? That's my view of it. Like, why are people needing to go there? Like, why are we even in this position that we have the system set up where we have food banks? Like, why are people not independent, and why aren't we breeding independence within people? So I'm not really all for the whole idea of a food bank. I'm more for maybe give people plants and let them plant something, or let them decide what they need. Like, why can't you just give them money on their card? Why do we have to give the money to someone else and then they provide the food banks? Why, like, that, in my view, breeds dependence on the system, not independence. Like, not even being able to go and shop for what you want. Like, why not have a shop where you come through and get what you want instead of a set parcel, just to get that sort of thinking of being independent, like having your own mana intact. And it's not, I don't say this in a fucking idiot, it's just, this is my view on food banks. Like, I've never had negative experiences with them. They're nice people, everything like that, but it's just, why do we even have a system like that? Why can't we just have community gardens? Like, why are people so hungry that we need to have food banks? Let's like step back and look at the bigger picture. We're just band-aiding by providing a food parcel, in my view. We're not actually getting to the cause of why people are going hungry. So that's my view on the whole food bank and how it all is. Yeah, so get people hungry, but yeah, why are they hungry is more my thinking.
So I remember as well that you talked about that you need to break the generational cycle as well.
Yeah, because a lot of people, if that's what they grew up seeing, that's all they know, and they don't even understand that they're part of the system. Like, I don't even think they get to that point of realizing. And like, why is it normal? Why is it not normal for people to have their own, I don't know, orchards or whatever? And I grew up in the country too, by the way, which is why the idea of having land is very, I don't know, it's real for me. It's how I grew up, sort of thing. So it's doable in smaller communities. Why? That's just, yeah, why do we have them? I don't understand. And why do sometimes they ask you, if you're a WINS client, to do a budgeting form on like the next to nothing money that you have? Why are you then asking me to budget it? Do they not understand inflation? Like, why do they need to know? It's none of their business, really. Like, if you have a look at how much we get weekly, it's next to nothing anyways.
I'd like to see how they cope if they got the same money that we did, and
yeah,
see how they would cope, because we live week to week, and we've got a budget, and so we've got to look for bargains, and everybody's got bills paid, and so, you know, it's real hard on people and stressful. So we just got to try to help each other to understand. it's the cost of living. It's bullshit pretty much, because, you know, if diesel goes up, you think about everything gets delivered by trucks and they're all diesel. So they've got to recover their costs somehow to, you know, deliver the goods. And that means price of food, that goes up. So it's a chain reaction. So as soon as that goes up, this goes up, this goes up, this goes up. And it's finding it's really hard for people to do stuff or go away or have a holiday. You can't do that when you're on a benefit. You're on week to week. So, and unexpected bills, it's the right people that got, you know, they get paid all right, they can, doesn't thing, but they try and live in our shoes and see how we struggle each week to survive and feed us and the children.
And I remember as well, you said you had a dog, Buddy.
Yes, my dog, Buddy, my wee man.
Yeah, and so still having to, you know, look after him. That's what it's for.
Yeah.
So, Powai, can you imagine a society without food banks?
Sorry, what was it? Sorry, my kids. What did you say? My kids are just going to know everything.
I was just like, so I said, because Steve was saying that he couldn't imagine a society without food banks. Can you?
Well,
Yeah, I can.
Kids have got a bottom pit, they can fucking eat, I'll tell you that. You know?
There you go.
Your groceries for that week and what, quarter of it's gone already.
Another thing I remember, Powai, you talked about in your interview before was the importance of having choices.
Yeah, like freedom of choice, you're quite restricted and regimented, and then again, you don't realise that's how the system sets you up. Like, imagine if we didn't have these. That's just my view of it. Anyways, it's just like the system, yeah, quite regimented. You don't really have a lot of choices, you know, when you're on a benefit, you're, like you just said, you're surviving week to week. So your thinking is survival thinking. You're not thriving. You're not thinking future. You're just thinking, how am I going to get through this day? And if your mindset's that way, how are you meant to expect to think of another solution? You're just trying to figure out how you're going to feed your kids. You're not trying to think more sustainable or what's going to be better in the future. You're just living day to day. And so I just find you, when you're on the benefit, you're quite restricted. You're in survival mode. And how are people meant to be thriving when they don't even got the bare basics? So yeah, just trying to change the mindset as well.
Yeah. How do you think then we could empower people to be able to do that?
How can we empower people? I just think by like starting small, planting little ideas, little seeds, like something small. I thought like there's a solution is every time you go to the food bank, they have little trees or seedlings or something, and it's up to the individual if they want to take it home. And you don't even need land. Like if they got them in big enough containers, that's just something more future-proof. Like why not spend some money on just things like that? Or I don't know if they do community gardens, something like that. I don't know if that's a thing in town or not, but you know, I've got my own little garden. I don't have a big section, so it's like everyone's got a little bit of land somewhere. You don't even need ground really. But yeah, just I don't know, trying to look at solutions instead of, like I've said before, just breeding dependence on the system. That's set up to fail, if you ask me. You're just pretty much set up to fail. Yeah.
I don't know if you mentioned like why it was that you kind of ended up having to go to food banks to begin with.
What was that, sorry?
Or why is it that you found yourself having to use food banks to begin with?
Oh, it's just because what you get on a benefit's a joke. Like by the time you pay your rent and your power and your food, like cost of food's just so high and cost of living with inflation. So you find yourself in these positions where you're just like, oh, how? And what's worse is when they ask you why you got no money. That one's a laugh on the next to nothing money you get. Like, why are they even questioning that? That's none of your business, really, in my view. But yeah, and just think that people they're like find themselves in those positions. Like, why? Like again, why? Why are we in these places? Why are they not just I don't know, even just having free shops where, you know, instead of Wins loading your payment card, you get a card on with credit loaded on it, and this is just shop for free where you just go through and you get what you need, you know, and you could see what they buy because you own the sort of shop, just something like that. Like, people should always have access to food. It'll probably see a systemic effect with crime rates going down if people just had access to food all the time. Like, you just think bigger picture, why do people commit crime? But they don't look at that. They just look at crime, slap bandage on, quick little thing for these people, instead of looking at why they're offending or anything like that's happening. So if you want to look at the systemic side of things, like, you know, you don't got the bare basics. If you know, if you ain't got home going good, nothing else going to go good. And that's my view anyways.
No, that's good.
Don't get me started, Karina.
I hope you're seeing this as a platform that you can benefit. That's fantastic. I know, Steve, if there was anything that you wanted to add, anything you felt you hadn't said about your experiences with food banks. And
I reckon it's awesome that the people that volunteer to help out people are amazing. You know, not many people would volunteer, but I give people high five for doing that. You know, it's they're doing something for community. You know, everybody's got to live. You know.
Yeah, that's really important. Yeah. And Pawa, is there anything else you wanted to say?
So, I don't know. I just feel like I feel like my final word, like, moving forward, food banks, I don't think are solution focused at all. I don't think they should be a part of the future. If I'm being honest, moving forward, I feel like we should be, like I keep saying, breeding the independence amongst people and phase them out so they're not a normal, so people aren't going hungry, you know. Then find another way. Why are we just doing the same band-aiding, sorry my language, like, why are we band-aiding bullshit all the time instead of actually figuring out what's the core of the problems? You know, you'll see systemic effects if you can just get those basics right. So yeah, that's everything.
Thank you so much, Steve and Pawa. That was fantastic.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know, with regard to questions, answers and questions, if yeah, it's open to all three of us, I would say then.
I would like we get a set cost for people that use a green card for food and stuff like that. I reckon it should go up a bit more because of cost of living. You know, like they say you've got what, $200 and that's got to last you 6 months through that time, but unexpected things, you know, shit happens, and you've got to find a way to try to sort that out. But it can be overwhelming and stressing for people at the same time.
Yeah, no, that's a really important point.
And they always ask us, oh, what are you doing to with your money in that? And goes, well, budget. You know, like, yeah. Budgeting is hard because people got vehicles, petrol and diesel's not cheap. You know, you've got to still get from A to B. And what happens if your car breaks down? You know, and that could be really expensive as well. And to finding money to get it fixed or try to ask for help, people get overwhelmed about that. And I know a few of my friends are on benefit, and you know, shit happens. It is stressful on the parents and that. So, and what are they going to do for this week? We'll have to go and spend money to pay the bill to get the car back out, but not going to have money to get food. So the only thing we could do is ask the food bank for some help. And if we didn't have the food banks and all the people volunteering to help us out, would be absolutely fucked, to be quite honest. But sorry about my language, but it's just the way it is.
I'm not so good about the Zoom thing. How do we go back to we go to question and answers now? Oh,
Yeah, so I think it's good to open it up. Hawaii, Steve, many thanks for your contribution. Kitty, many thanks for the questioning process. I suspect most of the questions will involve all three of you. So if you're happy to sort of stay on standby, we'll see the questions as they come up. I think, folks, we're a small enough group that questions can probably be asked aloud. If you feel comfortable unmuting, asking your question, I'll signal you in so we're not talking across each other. But if you would prefer to ask in the chat, I will monitor the chat and flag some of the questions up and also invite others to speak. So I'm just reading in the chat. I haven't read it yet, but Ashwin has a comment. Let me quickly read it through. It's probably on your screens as well. The parable of the Good Samaritan highlights the human dignity transcends our social standing. That being said, oftentimes the people that we come into contact with may at times require more than just food banks. Sometimes a listening ear, basic psychological services, and a caring smile may lead to an improved mental state. So it is more of a comment than a question, but it's a comment that perhaps one of the three of you might want to add something to or comment, either to agree or perhaps to offer a different view on that comment from Ashwin. So an opportunity for any of you to do that. Kitty, your mouth is moving, but you're on mute, so I'm not I'm not sure what you.
Where's the chat box bit with the Zoom?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Let me.
Oh, there it is.
Everyone can do that. So down the bottom of your screens, you should find a chat option. If it's not open, if you click on that, that will generate a chat box that you can post questions or comments into.
Okay. Yes, I found it now. Yeah. I think that for me, in regard to the research, that is what food banks provided. I think is the most important part, that connection, that human connection, and more so than what came across, at least in the interviews, more so than even food, was just having that human connection and feeling recognised, especially compared to people's experiences with wins where they feel really discounted. So I think that, yeah, that's a really important point. I don't know how you found it, Steve, like in regard to when you went. I think you mentioned that it was, yeah, really important to have that connection with people, like speaking to people. And
yeah, the thing is, wins, there's a lot of things they don't tell you what you're actually eligible for. So how do you know if you're eligible for something and if you don't ask about it? And then if you're going to get like some stuff you've got to pay back and some stuff you don't.
But did you have, when you went to the food banks and you were able to talk to people there compared to when you talked to people at Wins, is there a difference between?
Oh, big difference. Like,
yeah.
yeah, they sit on their computers and push buttons all day, and they, get paid for it, and they, can make our lives harder because it can be very stressful. And mental health is really big at the moment because everybody is going through something. And, you know, nobody's normal. Everybody's got their flaws, and everybody's trying to survive. And if we can get together and, like, I watch a lot of YouTube, and it's quite amazing with big companies that how much food actually gets wasted. Why couldn't we do something to turn it around to help other people out instead of throwing it out, or something along those lines to help the community? Because everybody struggles, and it can be mentally challenging at times.
Yeah.
Kitty, for me, this was one of the most powerful parts of the report. We've got other people who want to come in, so I won't take a lot of time reflecting on it. But for me, the focus that you gave to ways that, if it's done well, food banks can affirm dignity, and if done badly, food banks can charge a price in dignity. I thought this was one of the really powerful parts of the report. I'm just going to very quickly offer three of the statements that you include, because I think they do capture this issue quite powerfully. William says, "You feel accepted. I can leave there with my bags and feel as though people have understood and I'm amongst friends." Anahira says, "You're not made to feel like you're bad in some way." And Mardi says, "They really welcome a person from their hearts."
And they do, 100%. You know, they don't judge, you know. People got to survive, you've got to eat. If you don't shit, you die, you know, pretty much. You know, it's wonderful that we've got people there to help us. And to be quite honest, if you guys weren't there helping the community, things have just turned shit, to be quite honest. And we need to sort something out and see what we can all do and what we can achieve to make life a wee bit easier and better for people.
Parwai, do you have any comment on this? There's a question in the chat for you, which I'll be coming to shortly, but just want to give you a chance to say something on this if you wish to, but if not, no problem at all.
Yeah, I can. How would you put your name to independence? Yeah, they can. Well, independence, first you've got to change the individual's mindset. Am I not on it? Yeah, you've got to change the individual's mindset. So firstly, not being in a survival mode on a benefit. So I don't know if you increase that money by some amount, because that's like next to bugger all what you get on that. And if you can get someone to shift their mindset, and even within the WINS organisation, offer courses that are a bit more, I don't know, challenging. It's like they think you can only do level 3. It's like they don't think people are capable of doing a degree or something while on the benefit. Like, why are we limiting and restricting people there? Why not let them study a whole degree, and instead of just offering the level 3 courses that, in my opinion, don't lead to very high-paying jobs, which is what you need if you want to live a comfortable life. Independence, I don't know, down at the marae down here, they do have a community garden that you could go in, like, so maybe having more connections there, and then that sort of, you grow a social circle if you're involved with the marae and the marakai that they've got there, and, you know, you can get some seeds to bring back home. But, you know, having a community garden is one way to link the whole community that's right there. There's a kaupapa, it's positive, it's right there. Like, if I just had a local one, not just the marae one, but just for everyone to access, I think that's a better way, instead of having just so many, like every playing park, that you had a garden that people could help themselves to. Maybe that's one way for independence. I don't know, some sort of solutions that's mana enhancing as well. You know, I just really don't agree with the fact that we're in positions that we have to go and ask for food. Like, that's just like total bullshit, really. Why are we even in these positions? But yeah, those are sort of, I suppose, some ideas moving forward, and bearing in mind that I did grow up in a small community off the land, and we killed our own meat and all that sort of stuff. So I've seen it happen in a community where we all bartered and shared and everyone looked after each other, but that was a rural small community. So that's just, I don't know, that's how I grew up. So maybe that's why I look at things through a different lens as well, because I haven't grown up in the city where that's what was always normal for me. So when I learnt about them, that was a foreign thing. I didn't grow up with it, so that's a little bit different as well. That's probably one way. And the biggest thing is the individual will want independence. Like, that's the first step, is that they don't want to use these services and they want a better sort of way of doing things. But yeah, I don't even know if I answered that question, but yeah, that's what I've got to say.
Great, and it was a great question from Ian. Lucia has her hand up, so we'll be going to her shortly. But before we do, Ian, is there anything you want to pick up further around the independence issue and how that comes into this, or any further question related to the one you have in the chat? Go ahead.
No, I really thought Puai she answered that really well, actually. Yeah, it's just trying to figure out how we, places that are already doing these sorts of things, how can we enable that more? I guess a side question to that is, do you find, it's only one part of a benefit, but is the accommodation supplement adequate for you guys, do you think?
I'm going to say no. It's not, because it's still, like, inflation's so high that the accommodation supplement still, like, doesn't, it definitely helps, but doesn't see you through. Yeah.
It's all from me anyway. Thank you for that.
Lucia, if you're able to unmute, go ahead and ask.
Yes. Hi, Kitty. Hi, everyone. Sorry for the light. This was the best position I could follow the conversation. Thank you very much, Steve and Puai, for sharing your experiences. I actually have a question for you, Kitty, because I was wondering if you have talked also with food producers. So I can see, as Puai was explaining, I also have grown up in a small community, so it's quite common, like you give someone something and they give you a salami or some food, so it's much more accessible. So I wonder, what is the perspective of people who are producing food? Like, do they see this as like a normal, or I don't know if you have any comments on that. Well, if you have done it in the first place, so interviewing food producers. Thank you.
The short answer is no, I didn't. But it's only talked to as well people, so running food banks and people who are giving out food parcels. But I guess I'd be interested to know, when you think about it then in those terms, in regard to talking to food producers in this space, what do you think?
Yeah, because it's a great work that food banks are doing. It's really good, but ideally, really, we would be moving forward to when they are not needed anymore, right? Because then it means that the problem is solved and everyone is being able to be sustainable together. But as long as there is this this need and the need for that, I don't know. It sounds quite a complex problem, but it is a great work, and I think we must be very proud that it has so much application in the real world. Sometimes research and it's just like up in the clouds, and just seeing this is really great. Well done, Kitty.
I guess now I see what you mean. I guess how I'd see it is more than in regard to, we need to look at getting people more money, so we need to look at social welfare regard to wages rather than food production. So that would be, yeah, that's the with regard to accessibility in those terms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Thank you.
Thanks for that, Lucia, and thanks for the reflections, Kitty. We've got a little bit more time if we want to take it. So the floor is open if there are further questions for Kitty, Steve, or Pawai. Or questions. Lucia touched there on what it's like to be doing this research. If there are questions about what's involved in doing this sort of research, we can certainly explore those issues as well.
Maybe I could ask a question of Kitty. Having done this, I'm not sure what your background is, from a Christian aspect or not, but did this, if, your reflection on it, did it affect your theology or your idea of mission as you did this? How did it impact you?
I think for me, because I did go in, I was never kind of shy about the fact that I'm a human rights and food advocate. And so for me, food banks are kind of almost the antithesis, well, they are the antithesis of that, and I kind of came in quite with that, kind of in that headspace. But really, like, just going back to even the first comment that was made, one thing that shone through was how important it is, that human connection, that compassion that people get, that they don't get in other places in their lives. And I think that really struck me, that dignity that can be found in food banks and getting food parcels. That was humbling, and I think that is really important. And it also speaks to the fact how much that is missing, especially in social welfare spaces like in WINS, and how that can really make people feel so discounted. And I think that's something I called it like a human fissure in, even though food bank, I kind of do state, of course, that food banks are kind of in some ways part of the problem. They're also that human fissure that's saying, well, actually, we're also, it's so important, that, so significant in that respect. So I think, that was important to recognize that as well.
One of the quotes you offered that I thought brought that out really strongly was the quote from Sharon, who really valued the social side of the food bank contact. She says, but before she was involved in getting the food parcel, when I didn't have that, I was really, really, really lonely. So she's picking up on the social side, the social contact of the process as well. Rachel.
Kitty, I just had a thought. I'm not sure that unless I've missed it somewhere in the report, but did you have any feedback from the food banks or the charities themselves on any of their perceived frustrations, or how they felt around what they could or couldn't or were or weren't providing? Just with the reality and current, economic situation, all that sort of thing, their perspective.
Not so much, actually. I don't feel, maybe the question wasn't around that, but I don't feel that they would discuss that. Yeah, not so much. I think maybe there was definitely a kind of an acknowledgement of, that it's not pushing things forward, right? And it's definitely having to deal with an immediate need, but it's not, you know, that's really, it's a contentious space that they're working in, and so it's not that, yeah. But I think the issue is always that feeling that it was always a meantime thing, but it's somehow become a long-term thing. I think that frustration was there. Yeah.
Cool, thank you.
Kitty, a question I'm always interested in when somebody's done a long piece of research like this is whether there was a particular aspect of it or a particular event in it which surprised you, and if there was, what was it that surprised you in doing this work?
In the research itself, or the experience. Oh, in the research itself. So actually, yeah, what came out of the research, right? Is what I mean. I think what shocked me, which maybe, yeah, was when I was looking at how established food banks are, like the connection that they have with WINS and the need for referrals from a lot of food banks, for instance. And I mean, that was very kind of, and that was something that was brought up by some of the food, you know, participants as well, that it was a kind of unnatural relationship between, you know, how they've become so part of the social welfare system. And the other part that kind of shocked me was how I was the biggest beneficiary of the food banks of the supermarkets, because like now, especially now, you have food rescue organizations that take massive amounts of food, and then they don't ever have to deal now with this food surplus issue, in a sense, because there's this whole dealing with two issues at once, the food waste and the hunger issue. And also, I just love the fact that you can go into a supermarket and you can even buy more from them and put it in a bin on your way out to give to a food bank. I mean, I just feel like that's such a, yeah, it was quite a disturbing part of it, and it kind of speaks to the fact that a lot of the time it is about still profit before people, and that's kind of even within this kind of food charity space, it's been really co-opted by by businesses. And yeah, those 2 points, I think, just how established they've been and how insidious it's been, that they've kind of become so massive. Yeah.
Thanks. So we'll be going soon to our final organisational person who'll offer a brief reflection on the report. But before we do that, want to make sure that any participants who want to make a comment or ask a question are able to do so, and then I'll just give an opportunity for a final comment to bring this part of the evening to a close from Pawai, and then from Steve, and then I'll be going to our final person, Mike Tonks, who will speak about the report. So first, I'm just looking to see on the screen whether any hands are going up or people are muting. It looks as if people have had a chance to ask the questions or offer the comments that they wish to. So with that in mind, Steve, any final comments that you want to make on this?
Always hear people say mental health, and people think it's a joke, but it's not a joke, because everybody's going through shit in life, and we need people to talk to, or to try to get some help. It's like the businesses all think of profit, and rich gets richer and the poor get poorer, and it's kind of, you know, money is all evil, but everybody needs it to survive, and it's real hard for people, especially bigger families with, you know, I've got mates that got 3 to 4 kids in there, and what they live off, and if they got themselves a job and they're pretty stoked about that. But then after working a 30-hour or 40-hour week, and then all your costs coming out, and end up with less money that you were, and you're more better off to be unemployed and staying on the benefit and money that way. They need to put wages up for starters. Like $21 is not enough. I feel it's got to be up a bit more so people can actually buy stuff and try to survive.
Thanks, Steve. That's a very powerful note to be bringing that to an end. Pawai, any final comments or thoughts in this part from you?
Yep, my last one is mā tauroro, mā takuroro, ka ora a te iwi. That's my final whakataukī for the night. So, yep, that's me.
Thank you. Kitty, any final reflections before we pass over to Mike? You're on mute again. We're missing them.
Oh, Nick minute.
I really don't like to. I did prepare a little something. Shall I say it now? Is that or do I do it at the end?
It's entirely up to you. Why don't we? I think I know what you mean. Why don't we hold on that for the very final part? And at this point, I'll invite Mike Tonks from the Catholic Social Services here in Dunedin, who's been read the report. He's been listening to what people have said, and he's just going to address us with a few words. Over to you when you're ready, Mike.
Kia ora koutou, ko tapu te ranga toko motu, no te whanganui a tāra hau, ko te pote toko kāinga, ko Mike Tonks taku noa. So it's great to be part of this kororo. I'm a social worker, ex-pastor and director of the Catholic Social Services, which is a community social service located in South Dunedin. We have social workers, counsellors, community support team, and of the many things that we do, one is that we run a community lunch for anyone of the community to attend. We use rescued food primarily, and one of the things in this report highlights the awkwardness sometimes of using somebody's leftovers to feed people, but we seek to do something valuable with that to support the whānau in our community. Our aim is always that this should be done with the community, not to them. And to do that, we support those who come along to be part of the team that actually make it happen, from cooking in the kitchen, cleaning, being part of the welcome, and so on, which is, I suppose, our bit to try and be alongside what Kitty puts in this report. We also, as a community agency, help food when we have some of that rescued food left over to support our clients, particular need, but typically we refer on to the actual food banks in our city because we're not a food charity. But food security is so important, and it was interesting. Recently, I spoke to the man that started Catholic Social Services in '69. And he said food banks was just not an issue at that time. It wasn't something on the radar because people had food and they had access to it, and there were other things which they needed. There was a greater level of support. Also, if you note in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, they note in that is that food is free in most universes. But it's obviously not free in this one. So somehow we have to do something about that. And I think, what Kitty's put together here, it helps us understand a little bit of the complexities of that. And it's a pretty cool report because we have a particular interest in this because we know some of the people that Kitty interviewed were people that come along to our community lunch and engage in that. And what was really cool was I was so impressed in the way that she undertook that research. The people that she spoke to felt really listened to by her when she went through that. And she did it in a really dignified sort of way. So to see that come out in this report is something pretty special, I think. I loved the way that she has framed this report around the thing of human dignity and how the systems we operate in are constantly seeking to undermine the people in this. Number of great quotes in the report. I think the protection of dignity should be the fundamental goal of all social systems, from families and whānau to schools and churches to wider society and the global community. Underpins kind of all sort of charitable endeavours, and recognising that when we, because we're in this universe and food is not free, somehow people have to pay for it. And in many different ways, it's their dignity, it's been having to tell stories, it's been able to jump through hoops. Does not seem the best way to keep the well-being of people and their mental and social community well-being if we continue to, propagate the system. I liked also that she said ultimately what shone through the interviews was how destitution was not due to people making the wrong choice. It was due to them not having suitable choices to begin with. The discriminatory barriers in place had severely reduced people's life opportunities, such as for Rawiri, Māori who had just been moved into social housing. And he said, I had no choice from the day I was born. I was put into a system that wasn't mine and still isn't mine, but I had to live with it to survive. She also notes poverty blame has not only self-disciplined the poor into silencing themselves, but pitted the rest of us against them by portraying them as blameworthy. I think we heard some of that through the conversation with Steve and Pauai this evening, and also with Kitty, and it was great to hear their kind of stories and experience, and grateful for what has been given, and that is seen in the report, but recognising that there's a bigger thing at stake. And so I think, the report has some good recommendations in there and pointers for churches and community agencies as we try to navigate providing a compassionate response to community need that is also severely limited by the resources which we have as community agencies to meet this overwhelming need that is likely to become even greater when we're told that we're heading into higher inflation and a potential recession. The recommendations that our role is not just to give, but to advocate for some social justice, which ensures that all people can survive with this dignity. In my final thing, Ashwan mentioned it, and I'll like to mention it as well as a Christian response. That, lastly, I do remember as I read this report, I'm reminded of the Jesus story, which was mentioned before, the parable of the Good Samaritan, where a man is attacked and left stripped of his dignity, his clothes, his economic abilities to sustain himself, and his freedom, and he's left on the side of the road, naked, beaten, hungry. And I think we can easily recognise that the system has been one of the potential instigators of this harm on the man in the story. At this point, he needs first aid, food, wound care, and clothes. And along comes the Samaritan, provides him with this. And the most important thing, he takes him to a place where he can recover and regain his dignity. And I think if we take the Jesus story seriously, Christian church-based agencies can consider how we do the latter as well as the former. What do we do when we meet somebody like this to help work with them to recover that dignity? And that might be advocating to higher levels to what we wrap around people to find this kind of support. Because while providing the immediate need is vital, so is providing a place where people can regain this sense of mana motahaki. Otherwise, I think the Good Samaritan is in danger of facilitating a further assault on the person's dignity and well-being. So, finally, I just think, Kitty, you've done a great job. It's really great to see, and I hope it finds a good place in the ongoing korero with agencies, with community, with funders, with those that take responsibility for the citizens in our community, and that in taking those recommendations that they could go a long way to ensuring that the Samaritan's actions remain being good. So.
Yura, thank you, Mike. That was very thought-provoking and a wonderful way of taking us both to the report, but also to some of the Christian scripture, which has a bearing on it. Before we hear from Kitty, one other person who's been absolutely crucial in the production of the report, as I mentioned at the beginning, is Jonathan Robinson. And I do just want to make sure that Jonathan has an opportunity to share any thoughts that he has at this part of the evening. So Jonathan, don't want to put you on the spot, but if there's anything you'd like to offer at this point, please. You've done a wonderful piece of work in making all this possible. We would love to hear any thoughts or reflections you
have. Kia ora koutou. Thank you, David, for picking on me, and thank you so much to Steve and Puai and Kitty for sharing with us this evening. It's been really good to hear. I've really just tried to be an encourager and a bit of a midwife for this report. Kitty doesn't have a lot of experience dealing with church organisations, and that's the expertise I brought to try and help her communicate her really valuable research and the passion and insight that she has to the audience that we're hoping it's going to go to. And it's been really, really encouraging to hear Ian and Rachel and David, Ian, Rachel and what's your name, Mike? That's all right. Mike and I go to the same church, so I should know his name. He's a good friend, but I've forgotten it. So great to hear your endorsements, and I really do hope that other people hear those endorsements and take this report on board. I felt a bit convicted and a bit ashamed when Ian asked the question, what theological insights has the report brought out? Because I have to be honest, I haven't had a lot of time to really reflect on this report. I just wanted to see it happen and get it in the right shape. And I feel, as a theologian myself, I should have been spending more time contemplating it. But this evening's actually been a really good time to do a bit of that, and I want to just reassure Ian that I'd love to talk more about this and think more about it, and that we haven't necessarily finished thinking about food from the point of view of how it connects with our faith. So just a couple of very quick things that I want to throw out that have sort of occurred to me listening tonight. One is just, I think and I'm speaking in terms of from a Western Christian perspective, I think Western Christianity has often not appreciated how significant food is in the scriptures, both in the Hebrew Bible and in the Christian New Testament. Often the images of eternal life, the images of salvation, images of community are really based around food and people's ability to enjoy the good fruits of the land. And food and land, as Puai sort of mentioned today, are really closely connected. And one of the problems with our modern society is that disconnect that we've created. And I think that's something for me as a Western Christian that I probably need to rediscover and need to take with me as I read scripture, is to really notice food a bit more and see its significance and its connection to holiness and to God's goodness and that sort of thing. Second thing, and again, I'm not picking on anyone, I'm talking more about us as a group, but I think Western Christians have focused on the individual very often at the expense of thinking about the system. And one of the things the reports really brought home is that we can love the individual, but we can be contributing to the problem in the way we do that. And that we really do need to think very carefully about how we are in the world and understand systems, understand that we you know, there are bigger forces at play. And I think there are spiritual terms for that, but I won't give you a Bible study now because not everyone signed up for that tonight. But I think there are scriptural and theological concepts that help us deal with that. And again, I think those are things that we've neglected in our tradition as Western Christians. And the last one is going to sound maybe very radical to some people, but I think we've also assumed that Christianity and capitalism go hand in hand and they sort of belong together. And I think that's, you know, really just an accident of history rather than something that is necessary. And I think some of the things that we're talking about, you know, why should we pay for food? Why do we not help people gain independence? Why are they dependent on shops or government handouts? And we need to ask ourselves what we've grown comfortable with and assume is right. The Christian heritage of Western society, we know, is a mixed blessing, and hopefully we're able to see that. But sometimes we're not as critical as we could be about how we make connections in our minds. And I think the assumption that capitalism is Christian, it's an accident of history, and I think deserves some reflection and challenge. Thank you, David. I wasn't expecting to say anything, but it turned out I had something to say. So I just want to say again, thank you to Kitty and Steve and Puawai, kia ora, and kia ora koutou everyone for joining us this evening, and indeed, hopefully those who are watching the video and being encouraged to read the report at a later time as well. God bless.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. And I just want to share, I've shared a little bit in terms of some of what for me were powerful quotes from the report. And I do want to share a little bit of Jonathan's introduction to the report, because although he said he hadn't reflected much theologically, I think there is a really powerful theological comment that he makes in his introduction, and I just want to share that. This research, he says, is a gift to us in the churches, as it provides information and insight into the people we seek to serve and the issues we seek to address. It allows churches, food banks, and other service providers to stop and hear the voices of those who are hungry. Most importantly, this research affirms our work, but also critiques it, showing us how sometimes our good intentions may be counterproductive, both for the individual we are seeking to serve and for the wider social reality. If our work in the community aims to be more than simply assuaging our own felt need to do something and to actually make a difference, we need to listen to their voices. And I think that's a profound theological truth, the need to listen to the voices of the people for whom this is lived experience and are able to speak to us from that lived experience. So thank you for that, Jonathan. I appreciated that. And thank you, Kitty, for making this report available so we can hear these voices. As we draw towards an end, over to you for a final comment, and then we'll ask Puawai to end with a karakia. Over to you, Kitty.
Yeah, I did prepare just a little something I wanted to say at the end. So while I was conducting this research and completing my doctorate, an issue that I found particularly jarring was that of disconnection between academia and grassroots action, between human rights rhetoric and domestic social policy. and between the objectives of food banks and the needs of food parcel recipients. But a way in which to bridge these disconnects was also evident: the inclusion of real-life struggle and resilience. And this is one of the reasons the human right to adequate food is so significant. Not only is food reframed as a right rather than simply a commodity, but those who are living in food poverty are recognized as vital agents for effective change, rather than a pitiable backdrop to action. Creating this report and having this launch are attempts to bridge these disconnects by using a platform made possible by academic research to showcase the struggles of those affected by food poverty in Aotearoa as human rights abuses, and promote their experience and expertise as key to social justice action and social policy. Currently in Aotearoa is not only in the midst of a cost of living crisis, but a human rights crisis. As Christmas approaches, reports describe how food banks are not only experiencing this in a rising demand and need, but in a shrinking number of donations. If we continue to focus our energy on compassionate support, this need will only increase. We need to lend our voices, our efforts, and our organisations to advocacy for structural and financial change, and a human rights-based solution that will help us build the fairer and more just society we want. Those working within the food charity space are in a prime position to be the witnesses, the advocates, and the activists. You can reframe how food poverty is understood and how the lived experiences of the thousands of Kiwis who have to deal with hunger on a daily basis are recognised and acknowledged. You can bring to light who is accountable and who should actually be feeling the shame of food poverty in this country. Saying that, I commend you for your tireless work on the front lines. I know that you're more than aware of the contentious space you're working in, and I hope that you consider this report a reinforcement to your ongoing efforts in its attempts to focus on what is and what could be. On that note, I want to thank Charles Hewlett and Catherine Heslop from the Baptist Union for endorsing this report, and Mike from Catholic Social Services, Rachel from the Otago Southland Baptist Association, and Ian from the Salvation Army for their recommendations today and their important work in this field. Massive thanks go to David for emceeing and for all his ongoing effort, feedback and support, and to Jonathan for his tireless enthusiasm in this project from the very beginning and for sticking with it for what will be a year now. Lastly, I want to thank Steve and Pauai for their candid responses here this evening and their significant contribution to this launch today.
Not a problem.
Thanks, Kitty. Thanks, Steve. Pauai, can you close the evening with a karakia for us?
I am karakia. Motunga, kia toi, kia tātou katoa, te atu pātu tātou ariki hui krati me te arohawa te atua, me te whiwhinga teitanga ki te wairua tapu, ake, āmene.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks very much for being with us, and we hope to get the recording up soon on the YouTube channel. Many thanks. Good night.
See you guys.